Sean, we talk so much about the Detroit Lions and that 8-2 finish. I really do believe the Detroit Lions are now America's team. I think everybody is rooting for the Detroit Lions. I think the NFL views the Detroit Lions they put them extremely high on the pantheon, I think, of teams that the public wants to see. Hard Knocks last year, they offered the Lions to do Hard Knocks again this year. They declined. I wish they would have done that. But before we get into what I was going to talk about, do you think that was a good move to say no to Hard Knocks this year?
I'd say keep the momentum going.
I did too.
Ryan, America's team?
I think they are America's team.
Listen, I don't think it's that far off.
Yeah.
Can I tell you why? I think Hard Knocks kind of put into focus. Everybody's wrapped up in their own team, right? And one thing that I've noticed in years doing shows here, there, and everywhere, and it just happened a couple weeks ago. So I was doing some Stanley Cup stuff for the station down in Atlanta, and I was talking to a couple of the hosts, and I said to them, do you realize the Detroit Lions have one playoff win in the Super Bowl era? And they both started laughing. They thought I was joking. And I go, I'm serious. They have one playoff win. Oh, come on. No. I go, okay, look it up. That's happened to me with a guy in Minnesota. That happened to me with a guy in Minnesota in our own division, mind you. That happened to me with a guy in San Diego, and it happened to me just recently with guys in Atlanta. I don't think people in mass, nationwide, understand the lack of success of this franchise. They really don't. So when I tell people that, it's almost like they have to go fact check me, and they come out eyes wide open going, dude, one playoff win?
Can't believe it.
I think people along the lines of what you're saying, I think there's validity to what you're saying. The combination of the characters involved and everybody loves the Cinderella story.
Everybody
does. And the Lions are a Cinderella. They are.
There's no doubt about it, and I think that's why the NFL selected the Lions to play in Kansas City in Week 1 to open up the season. And I think when you look at this schedule, right off the bat for the Lions, too, I mean, to play that game in Kansas City, Dan Campbell said, what did he say? He said something along the lines of, the NFL didn't select it. We might lose, but we're not going to get our ass kicked.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think the NFL knows that, too. We're going to put up a fight. We might lose that game, but we will not get our ass kicked.
Don't shy away from it. When the moment presents itself, don't shy away from it. And I think we as Lion fans, because we've been beaten and downtrodden for so long, I think a lot of times we look at things and we go, oh, no, well, what if they lose and this team has fallen apart in the past? This team has already shown that they aren't the, here it comes, same old Lions. They've already shown that in my mind, okay? That team last year had every reason to continue to roll down that hill and catch up some speed and finish with 3 or 4 wins. And they didn't. And they fought back, and they nearly got themselves in the playoff. So, again, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but this team has a little bit of credit line behind it right now. And it's not just hope. It's not just aspirations. It's based on that which we've seen. And I think that's the most important thing that you can base future hope on.
When you talk about the start, and I want to put the schedule back on the screen, this start at Kansas City, and then you got a couple of home games against Seattle and Atlanta. And we don't have to do the whole thing, but I do think the start is important up until that game at the Ravens. So, I mean, at the Chiefs, Seattle and Atlanta at home, at Green Bay, and then you've got Carolina and at the Bucs. That's 6 games. You know, I'm going with a 5-1 record. I think it's a 5-1 start, and depending upon what happens against Kansas City, potentially 6-0.
You know, to me, I always like to do high side and low side. I think 4-2, worst case scenario. I can't get out of my head. There are 2 games that scare me in that mix. I mean, we already talked about one, that Carolina game and the relative ease that they had. I don't want to forget what Geno Smith did to the Lions last year.
I think Seattle and Carolina are two get-back games.
I hope so.
That are wins.
I wish I could get out of my mind the relative ease that Seattle had going up and down the field. And again, it was early in the season. It was a different type of dynamic. Well, Seattle could say the same thing because they hadn't found their running back yet in K9, so to speak. So I want to get that taste out of my mouth. But, Ryan, is he being a slappy for saying 5-1?
I've been accused of worse.
I don't. Flannel, seriously, do you think that's crazy to look at that 6-game schedule and go 5-1? I don't think it's crazy.
I'm saying 5-1 at worst, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Ryan when it comes to the Carolina Panthers and the Seattle Seahawks games could be get-back games. I think that the Lions will win those ones in revenge for some of the worst losses of last season. I think they'll lose to Kansas City. I think Seattle's going to be tough, but I say 4-2 is probably the floor. 5-1 wouldn't shock me, though.
5-1 wouldn't shock them. 4-2 most likely.
One thing that we always do, and we all make this mistake, yours truly included, is every year we look at schedules, and there's going to be a team that we're looking at that isn't going to be nearly as good as we think it is. And every year there's always a team that isn't going to be as deadly as it eventually turns out to be. And you know what? For a lot of teams last year, that personification was probably the Detroit Lions. Do you know how many people looked at the Lions in 2021 and said, oh, that's a W. That's a and especially after the start that they got off to. You know, if you're looking at your schedule moving down the stretch and you're going, okay, well, we got Kansas City this week. We got the Lions. Well, that's a win. Well, the Lions jumped up and bit a lot of people last year for that. So that's one thing, Ryan, when you and I were younger, you could set the NFL to your watch. You know what I mean by that? Ho-hum, Dallas and San Francisco will be in the NFC Championship game. It's a different thing now. I mean, we see. Do I think Philly's going to be all that? I do. Do I think the Lions are going to be up there? I do. But there's probably going to be 2 or 3 teams that we didn't see coming on both sides. They're going to be damn dangerous teams. And I think that's one thing we forget when we play this off-season exercise. It's fun to play. I love to play it as much as everybody. But I think we kind of forget that what we think they are right now on June 19th is not going to be what they eventually turn out to be.
Can I give you my surprise team?
Absolutely.
In the NFL this year? The Denver Broncos. I think the Denver Broncos behind Sean Payton and Russell Wilson are going to have a bounce-back year.
He is a better quarterback than he showed.
I agree with that. I think they will be what they were this year, what they were supposed to be last year. Now, I'm not saying they're going to get to the Super Bowl, but I think they're a playoff team. They're going to win a lot more games, and they're going to be in the thick of things late in the season. Denver Broncos. That's just as far as surprise teams go. I think that's one for me.
I think that's a good choice. You know, they were the Russell Wilson I saw last year. I've always been a fan of Russell Wilson from afar. I mean, he can do so many things. If you remember, even when he moved on over to Wisconsin, he can do so many things to hurt you, and he did that at Seattle. The guy that I saw last year wasn't Russell Wilson. That was some of the ugliest games I saw last year involved the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, the few times they were on primetime television, we have a mutual friend who's a big Bronco fan, and I never hesitated to tell him. I was like, dude, your team is abysmal. Like, I cannot watch this team offensively. So it'll be fun to see. But, hey, listen, is there a chance that team comes from our division? Maybe some people are looking at the Lions as being that surprise team. It won't be a surprise to us by virtue of the way that they finish, but that's the one lesson from the National Football League I've seen in the past decade.
And then my surprise team in the NFC, nobody's talking about them. It is the New Orleans Saints. I mean, when you look at Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, who knows what Michael Thomas is going to do. They've got Jamal Williams there as well. They've got an offensive line. They've got some defensive players. They were really, really staunch defense last year. If they just had a quarterback, they would have definitely won that division. I think the New Orleans Saints, who were 7-10 last year, I think they could flip the script this year, go 10-7 or 11-6, and do some real damage in the NFC. I mean, could you imagine the Detroit Lions and the New Orleans Saints in Wild Card Weekend? Even though there would be the I don't anticipate the Lions having the number 1 overall seed in the NFC, so I do anticipate them playing on Wild Card Weekend, and maybe they will play as a 3 seed against a 4 seed or something like that.
You know who was a cute little team last year? And I have no idea how they were a cute little team, but our mutual friend, Greg Canner, his little Commanders. How did that team
They
go?
got no quarterback, too.
How did they go 8-1?
They're
Seriously.
They're a good team without a quarterback.
If Sam Howell can do anything, and by the way, let me say for the record, I have my doubts there. I watched a lot of Sam Howell at North Carolina, and he's one of those guys that I reached out to some of our scout friends, Scott Bischoff, and I would say, am I missing something? I know everybody talks about this guy, and he's playing for Mac, but what's supposed to jump out to me about Sam Howell? If Sam Howell can do anything, why can't the Commanders improve on an 8-1 season? How they were 8-1 last year, to me anyways, there was nothing there.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. So I think that might be a team to look out for.